I will now call up Equality Caucus Liaison, Congresswoman Julie Johnson.
Thank you all. You know, it's so amazing to be with such talented legislators here in the Women's Caucus, and it's such an honor to be here. You know, I'm Julie Johnson. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and Texas is the hardest state to vote in. We've been down this road before, trying to deny women and people the right to vote. But there's an expression in Texas that keeps coming up for me up here in D.C. It's called all hat and no cattle. What does that mean? Well, it comes from the expression of people who like to play cowboy, and they wear a big old hat, and they might wear shiny boots, but they have no substantive essence to them at all behind it. Hence, they have no cattle. They don't know what they're doing. And that's kind of what Republicans are doing here with women. They like to say all the words, but when you look at their actions, there's nothing there. They like to say they're pro-family and they're pro-women, but their actions are to make it as hard as possible for women and families to be part of this legislative institution. When they say they're pro-family and pro-women, they make it very hard for women to earn an equal wage. When they say they're pro-family and pro-women, they're doing everything they can to take away our health care, cutting Medicaid, cutting Medicare, making insurance inaccessible, keeping women from making their own medical choices. They say we should have autonomy over our bodies when it comes to vaccines, but God forbid women have autonomy over their bodies when it comes to their own healthcare choices and reproductive health. And now they don't want women to be able to be members of Congress and exercise their full scope solely because they've chosen to have a family. That's not pro-family. That's not pro-women. It's all hat and no cattle. And you look at the SAVE Act. Women are disproportionately disadvantaged in the documentation provided, but also in the requirements to have to physically go in person to a election office that could be hours and hours away and certainly not open into the evening because you're working all day and you're at your carpool and you're picking up your kids, or even more so, you're a sandwich mom where you have elderly parents you're caring for and kids you're caring for and trying to work all at the same time. How the hell are you going to get to the election office by 5 p.m. to dig up that birth certificate that you can't find anyway? So the thing that's so disingenuous, and again, and why I say they're all hat and no cattle, is I offered some amendments to make this bill better. I offered an amendment to say, you know what? You can submit your documentation online. Outright rejected by the Republicans. If they're really concerned about your ability to prove who you are, why would they not make it as accessible and open as possible to prove who you are? They're making it as difficult as possible to prove who you are. The other thing is, in their bill, they offered that they have criminal penalties against somebody who registers somebody to vote who's not eligible. Well, what about criminal penalties for them denying the right to vote to eligible people? I offered that amendment, matching their criminal penalties, and they rejected that too. So they're more concerned about making sure people who are eligible from voting than making sure the millions of women and the millions of people who are eligible to vote to be able to cast that vote. They could care more about the ineligible voters than they are for the sacred violet right of the eligible citizens of this country to cast their right to vote. They're willing to put on the 32 people that cast a vote inappropriately against the 20 million people that may not be able to. Their priorities are completely misplaced. I also had an amendment that said, well, okay, that legal person was denied their right to vote. How do they fix it? What do you do if you are denied the right to vote when you're a legal citizen of this country? I made a provision that says, okay, a district court has to have a hearing within a certain time period to give that voter the right to cure, the right to be able to cast their ballot. Republicans outright rejected that as well. So they're not concerned about people voting. They're not concerned about citizens being able to cast their legal ballot. They're not concerned about making it easy for women, families, people of color, those with disabilities, our veterans serving overseas. How is an 18-year-old child of a veteran serving in Europe going to go register to vote when they're legally entitled to? How's that going to happen? Basically, we're telling those families of our men and women in the military, we don't care if you can vote. You can certainly die for our country, but we don't care if you can vote. So the Republicans are completely disingenuous when it comes to protecting women, when it comes to protecting families, when it comes to protecting the right to vote. And again, I'll say my favorite Texas expression, they're all hat and no cattle. And now I'll call